Tonight, picture a small clearing in the forest, where the trees lean close like listeners, and the sky is cut into fragments by their tangled arms. A storm has just passed. Rain still drips from the branches, plopping into the mud, and the air is sharp with the scent of wet leaves and ozone. Smoke curls upward from a fire struggling to live, its flames sputtering but holding against the damp. Around it, figures huddle together. Their bodies are lean, their skins smeared with earth, their eyes flickering with the restless light of something new, both fear and fascination. You'd probably never make it through a single Paleolithic night like this, but don't worry, I'll guide you safely through. So, before we go any further, if this quiet company helps, you can gently tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from, maybe lying awake in New York, or drifting in a quiet room in London. Drop your time and place below, so none of us feel alone tonight. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on timeless sleep. The storm has left behind more than water. In the far hills, lightning had struck an old pine. Its top smouldered and split, and from its trunk spilled a gift both dangerous and irresistible, fire. For early humans, such a flame was not ordinary. It was alive. It moved and devoured, it hissed when fed rain, it roared when given wood, and like all living things, it had moods. Fire gave warmth, kept beasts at bay, cooked meat into something richer, sweeter, yet it also destroyed forests, ate huts, and sometimes leapt at night like an enemy. It was not yet mastered, it was only borrowed. And so around those fragile flames, early humans began to whisper, to gesture, to treat it as something more than a tool. Imagine them watching the embers. They had no words as we know them, no vocabulary for divine or sacred, yet they felt it. The shiver on the spine when a shadow leapt against the rock, the hush that fell when sparks shot upward like stars fleeing back to the sky. Around fire something stirred, awe, and awe is the seed from which belief grows. At first the fear of natural forces shaped thought. Thunder was not noise, but a voice. Lightning was not an accident, but a weapon. Death was not the end, but a mystery that pressed close when a body cooled and stiffened. In this world, every force had agency, every silence could be a presence. To step into the dark forest was to feel eyes upon you, though none were seen. And in that constant tension between fear and wonder, ritual began to form. A branch snapped in the distance, and the people leaned closer to the fire. One of them picked up a charred stick and waved it, as if to remind the night of their ally. That gesture, protective, symbolic, as one of the earliest traces of ritual. It is not enough to feel fear. Humans act it out, shape it, give it form. The fire became a friend, the darkness an enemy, and the gesture a contract between the two. And from this contract grew repetition, and from repetition grew ritual. Death brought the deepest fear. When one of their own fell, whether from a hunt gone wrong, disease, or the jaws of an animal, something uncanny lingered. The body was familiar, yet no longer alive. Breath was gone, but the shell remained. Early humans must have stared, puzzled, uneasy. Where had the person gone? Was it into the sky, into the earth, into the flames? That question alone was enough to shape belief. Around the fire they remembered. They mimed the movements of the dead one's hunt, repeated the cries, patted the earth where blood had spilled. These were not performances, but rituals, ways of taming fear through action. By repeating, they gave meaning. By giving meaning, they birthed the first threads of story. The first sparks of religion, then, were not temples or priests, but feelings. They were the sudden hush when the wind howled too perfectly like a voice, They were the way fire made shapes dance on cave walls, shadows that seemed like spirits moving. They were the dreams told in morning whispers, dreams of ancestors visiting or animals speaking. None of this was abstract philosophy. It was lived, immediate, woven into survival, and yet, even here, humor slipped in. Imagine one man, nervous before the fire, suddenly sneezing from the smoke. The others laughed, the tension broke, and someone muttered that the fire itself had made him do it. A joke, but also an explanation. Even in the most serious rituals, laughter seeped through, reminding us that belief and play were never far apart. As nights passed, gestures became patterns, a certain way of tossing herbs into the flames, a chant hummed in rhythm with the crackle, a circle drawn in the dirt to keep predators or spirits out. These small acts layered into memory, and memory into tradition. Soon fire itself was no longer just a tool. It was a presence, one to be fed, respected, feared, and from reverence for fire, reverence spread to other forces. The storm that had left the tree burning was itself reinterpreted. The lightning was no longer chance, but intention. Perhaps the sky had thrown its anger, or perhaps it had gifted a spark. Either way, humans began to imagine a will behind the weather. In that imagining lay the birth of gods, not yet named, but already alive. Consider how fragile they felt. Every sound in the forest, every change in wind, every sickness that struck without cause, all demanded explanation. And where explanation failed, ritual filled the gap. To mark the body of the dead with ochre was to help them pass into another state. To burn herbs was to please the unseen. To arrange stones in a circle was to hold chaos at bay. Through such acts, the unknowable became bearable, and though their rituals were small, their meaning was immense. They transformed fear into structure, loss into memory, uncertainty into hope. Religion, in its first sparks, was not a system but a response to death, to fire, to thunder, to the terror of being small in a vast and mysterious world. So as you lie here safe in your room, consider those distant nights. Imagine yourself huddled around that fragile fire, its warmth the only thing between you and the hungry dark. Imagine the awe of seeing lightning ignite a tree, the dread of watching a companion stop breathing, the wonder of sparks rising like souls into the sky. It was here, in this mixture of fear and fascination, that belief was born, and in a way we have never stopped. We still stare at flames, still whisper stories into the night, still seek meaning in shadows. The fire that once frightened and comforted in equal measure now glows in every candle, every hearth, every screen. Its light carries the memory of those first rituals when awe became story, and story became the first faint pulse of religion. The rain stops, and silence spreads across the plain, broken only by the low rush of a river swollen with last night's storm. You walk with a small band of people, their feet sinking softly in the mud, their voices hushed. Ahead, you see a figure laid upon the earth. The body is cold, the chest no longer rising. Around it others gather, not just with grief, but with something deeper, a sense that what they do now must be done carefully, properly, with meaning. This is not the first body they have seen, but it is the first they will treat as more than flesh. Tonight the dead will not be abandoned. Tonight the first burial takes place. At first, the act is practical. The air is warm. A corpse draws predators. Covering the body protects the living, but slowly, practicality becomes ritual. Instead of tossing earth randomly, the group shapes a hollow in the ground, lined with stone. Instead of placing the body haphazardly, they lay it with care, arms folded, head tilted, eyes closed. Already the act is more than necessity, it is respect. To treat the body with care is to say that the person within it still matters, even if their breath is gone. One woman bends and places a tool beside the body, a stone scraper worn smooth from years of use. Another tucks a few beads of shell into the hair. A child, watching silently, picks a wildflower and lays it on the chest. These offerings mean nothing to a predator, but they mean everything to the living. They whisper that the dead one will need tools, beauty, companionship in whatever place they now walk. And in that whisper is the beginning of belief that life does not end at death, that something carries forward. Archaeologists today uncover such burials: Neanderthals at Shanidar in Iraq, Homo sapiens in Israel and Europe, and find pollen grains clinging to bones, pigments staining the soil, tools lying useless beside ribs. These traces tell us that the dead were honored, not discarded. To us, it is evidence. To them, it was meaning. They were not scientists dissecting causes, but mourners trying to soften absence. By leaving gifts, they turned grief into continuity, making the dead less gone, more journey. It is easy, perhaps, to imagine that these early humans knew nothing of spirituality. But bend down and press your hand against the damp soil, and you will feel what they felt: the weight of silence, the ache of absence, the fear of mystery. Their companions had vanished into something invisible. The world was too full of voices, storms, rivers, animals, for that invisibility to mean nothing. So they imagined a path, an afterplace, a realm beyond. Burial was not only protection from beasts, it was a gesture toward that unknown. The act of covering the body became rhythm. Earth piled, hands smoothed, stones arranged, and with rhythm came repetition. Every time a member of the band died, the act was performed again. In time, these burials gathered detail: ochre smeared on skin, bodies placed in crouched positions, as if sleeping. Tools, beads, even meat placed beside them. Over generations, the gestures deepened into traditions, traditions into rituals, rituals into the first religions of the dead. Imagine the flicker of torchlight on a burial at dusk. Shadows lengthen as the group circles the grave. No priest speaks, no written words guide them, yet everyone knows what to do. They lower the body carefully. They arrange the arms, they place the gifts. Perhaps one hums a low tune, repeating the same notes again and again, a sound that lingers in the air like incense. These are not random acts. They are the first ceremonies, born of love and fear. A curious thing happens. The burial not only honors the dead, but strengthens the living. By gathering, by acting together, the group binds itself more tightly. Each person feels the weight of shared loss, but also the strength of shared ritual. It is not only religion that is born in the grave, but society. The living learn that to survive, they must not just eat and hunt together, but mourn together, believe together. And here, a strange joke slips in, as it always does, among humans. One man, nervous, drops a stone into the grave too soon, hitting the corpse's shoulder with a thud. A murmur of laughter breaks the tension. He will not complain now, someone mutters. For a heartbeat the air is lighter. Even in death, humor walks with us, softening fear. Over time, burials become landmarks. The group returns to them, remembers who lies beneath, tells stories around the fire of the hunter who once caught a stag, of the woman who knew the herbs, of the child who laughed like running water. Graves become memory markers, anchoring the past to the present. And with memory comes lineage, identity, the first sense that we belong to something larger than ourselves. The choice of burial site itself becomes significant. Some bodies are placed in caves, dark and echoing, wombs of stone that seem to promise return. Others are laid near rivers, waters that carry life and perhaps carry souls. Some are positioned facing the rising sun, as though awaiting rebirth. None of these choices are random. Each reflects a growing sense that the world is not only physical, but symbolic. Every placement is a story told without words. Consider the red ochre smeared on bones found across continents. This pigment, the color of blood and flame, was not useful for hunting or shelter. Yet again and again, early humans carried it, ground it, sprinkled it over their dead. To cover a body in ochre was to cloak it in life's essence, to paint absence with the memory of vitality. It was, in a sense, resurrection by color, and in the quiet glow of that red, religion deepened. The burials of children tell us perhaps the most. Tools too large for their hands, beads too many for their years, flowers delicate against their bones. To mourn a child is to ask the deepest questions. Why should one so young vanish? In answering, people turned grief into hope. They imagined spirits, ancestors, after places where laughter continued. In this hope, ritual and religion grew inseparable from love. Some burials even reveal injuries healed long before death, signs that communities cared for the sick, fed the wounded, carried the weak. Burial, then, was not an isolated act, but part of a greater thread of compassion. To honor the dead was to say, we are more than survival machines. We are meaning makers. We are mourners. We are believers. As you linger in this scene, the firelight flickering on damp earth, notice the quiet dignity of the first burial, the scrape of stone on soil, the hush of voices, the careful placing of gifts. These are the earliest prayers, not spoken to gods with names, but whispered into the vast silence. And in that silence, something answers not in words, but in the soft strengthening of hearts, the binding of a group into a people. So tonight, as you rest, let yourself drift into that ancient hush. Imagine laying a flower upon the chest of someone you love, not knowing where they go, but refusing to let them go alone. Imagine the soil falling softly, the last glow of sunset painting the stones red. In that gesture, small yet eternal, humanity first reached beyond itself. It was here, in the first burials, that religion took root. The grave is closed now, the soil patted down, the offerings resting unseen in the earth. Yet above it, the people linger. They trace the mound with their hands, their fingers stained with a powder the color of rust and flame. This is red ochre, ground from stone, a pigment carried in pouches, sprinkled on bodies, smeared on bones. It is not useful for food or shelter, yet it is everywhere, across continents, across tens of thousands of years. Why? Because color, long before paint on canvas, became a language for meaning. Imagine the first time someone discovered ochre. They struck stone against stone, and a crumb of reddish dust smeared across their skin. It looked like blood, but it did not sting. It looked like fire, but it did not burn. It was neither alive nor dead. Yet it carried the memory of both. When they smeared it on their arm, they shivered, not from cold, but from the strange magic of transformation. Their skin became something else. Their body was marked, set apart, and so, from dust, ritual pigment was born. Archaeologists have found bones stained deep crimson in burials from Africa to Europe. The oldest, from caves in South Africa, date back nearly 100,000 years. Bodies were sprinkled with ochre until they glowed like embers in the earth. Was it blood, painted back upon the body to give it life? Was it fire, lighting the path into the dark? Or was it simply beauty, a refusal to let the dead vanish pale and cold? Whatever the reason, the pigment speaks across millennia. The dead mattered enough to paint, and ochre was not only for the dead. In caves, streaks of red run along walls, spirals and handprints pressed into stone. To place a palm against the rock and blow ochre dust around it was to leave a sign. I was here. But perhaps more than that, we are here, together. Every handprint is both personal and collective, a bridge between one human life and the mystery of the world. When those prints glowed by firelight, they must have seemed alive, as though spirits themselves had touched the walls. In some places, ochre was mixed with fat to make paste, then daubed on bodies. Warriors streaked it across faces, dancers painted it on chests, women rubbed it into hair, children smeared it onto arms. The red shimmered in sunlight and firelight alike, a moving canvas that blurred the line between person and spirit. To cover oneself in ochre was not merely decoration, it was transformation. One became part animal, part flame, part ancestor. The pigment made the invisible visible. Consider how persistent this practice was. For tens of thousands of years, across vast distances, humans kept grinding stone into powder, staining themselves and their dead. It was not trade or coincidence. It was shared need, the need to mark the boundary between life and death, the need to turn ordinary bodies into extraordinary presences, the need to say that this world was more than it appeared, that something burned beneath the surface. And there is a playful side to pigment too. Imagine a group of children finding a lump of ochre and grinding it between stones until the dust puffed into the air, coating their noses red. They laughed, sneezed, rubbed it into each other's hair. Their parents smiled, half amused, half reverent. Even play could carry sacred weight, for in laughter the pigment still whispered, "We are marked, we are more than animals." In burials, ochre gave dignity to the dead. A body sprinkled red did not look like decay, it looked like sleep beneath a blanket of fire. Gifts were laid with it, tools, beads, sometimes meat. The pigment tied them together, binding the grave into a story, and in that story was belief that the dead were not gone, but travelling somewhere that required colour, memory, presence. Ochre was the passport stamped upon their bones. The universality of this practice is astonishing. From the deserts of Australia to the tundra of Siberia, from the caves of Europe to the valleys of Africa, humans used red ochre, different climates, different languages, different hunts. Yet the same gesture: sprinkle the dust, mark the body, honour the passage. It is as if humanity itself shared a single ritual heartbeat, pulsing across continents long before trade routes or empires. Why red? Perhaps because it is the colour of blood, the essence of life. When blood spilled, life ended. To paint blood where there was none was to conjure life, where it had fled. Perhaps because it was the colour of fire, the element that lit the night. To cover the dead in flame was to guide them into the dark. Or perhaps because red was simply vivid, impossible to ignore, demanding attention even in shadow. Whatever the reason, the choice endured, a chorus of colour sung by countless hands. In time, ochre became more than burial pigment. It was used in ceremonies, painted on stones, rubbed onto carvings. It was traded across distances, carried in little packets of hide. To give someone ochre was to give them meaning. To deny someone ochre was to deny their place in the community. The pigment became currency, not of economy, but of ritual. Picture a group gathered at dusk, their faces painted red, their chests streaked with lines that caught the firelight. They dance, stamping feet, chanting low. The pigment glows with sweat, turning them into beings of flame. Around them, children watch wide-eyed, learning that these gestures are not mere play, but the heart of belonging. To join the circle is to smear the pigment, to take on the colour of the group, to become part of its story. There is something strangely modern in this. We still paint ourselves with cosmetics, with symbols, with flags. We still mark our dead with flowers, cloth, carved stone. We still use colour to make meaning. Red lipstick, red poppies, red flags. Echoes of the same instinct that ground ochre into dust by ancient firelight. The rituals change, but the impulse endures. And perhaps this is the deeper point, that ochre was not only pigment, but memory. When bones stained with red were uncovered generations later, they told descendants that their ancestors had honored, believed, remembered. The color outlived flesh, outlived stories, outlived language. It spoke silently across ages. We believed in something more. So lie back now and picture the glow of firelight on a cave wall streaked with crimson, the air dusty with ochre, the people's voices low. Imagine the moment when the first handprint appeared on stone, the first body glowed red in its grave, the first child laughed with pigment dust on their nose. These moments, small yet vast, were the beginnings of symbolism, of ritual, of religion. In the color of ochre, humanity first painted its invisible beliefs onto the visible world. And though the caves are silent now, the prints still remain. You could walk into one today, torch in hand, and press your palm to the ancient mark. You would feel the warmth of the stone, the grit of the pigment, and the echo of a hand like your own, stretched across time through red ochre. The first believers still touch us, still whisper their meaning into the silence of stone. The entrance yawns before you, a black mouth in the limestone hills, its edges damp with moss, its breath cold against your face. Outside, the sun still lingers, casting light on grass and trees. But step inside, and the world narrows into shadow and echo. The cave is not just a shelter, it is a threshold. Here, in the flicker of torchlight, humanity first began to shape stories upon walls, to turn the dark into a canvas of the sacred. The first steps crunch on gravel. Your torch sputters, and its light darts across the walls. At first you see nothing but rough stone, but then, faintly, a shape emerges, the curve of a bison's flank, a horse's head, a line of red dots spiraling upward. These are not accidents of geology, they are deliberate, painted or carved thousands of years ago, by hands as human as your own. The cave is alive with images, but only for those who enter its depths. To walk here is not to explore, but to participate in ritual. Think of the act itself. To crawl deep into narrow passages, to carry torches, to grind pigments of ochre, manganese, charcoal, to paint by flickering light, where shadows play tricks, where breath clouds the air. The effort was immense. These were not casual doodles. They were ceremonies of pigment and stone. The images were meant to be seen rarely, perhaps only by a select few. Shamans, initiates, the brave. To step into the cave was to leave behind the ordinary and enter the realm of mystery. The animals dominate. Horses with flared nostrils, bison with massive shoulders, deer with antlers spreading like trees. Some are painted with astonishing realism, others with bold abstraction. Lines overlap, as if generations returned to the same spot to renew the shapes. In places, the walls seem to move with the torchlight, so that the painted bison stampede, the horses gallop, the deer turn their heads. Imagine the awe of seeing your own art come alive in shadow and fire. No wonder the cave became a theatre of the sacred. Why these animals? Perhaps they were hunted, their flesh life itself. Perhaps they were revered, spirits greater than men. Perhaps they were both. To paint them was not only to remember, but to invoke, to call their power into the hunt, to ensure abundance. Each line of charcoal was a prayer, each stroke of ochre a bargain with the unseen. And when the group returned to the surface, they carried not just images, but the confidence of belief that they had spoken to the world beyond. In some caves, dots and handprints appear beside the animals, hands pressed flat against the wall, pigment blown around them, leaving behind silhouettes. These were not signatures, but declarations. I was here, I touched this place. To place a handprint was to leave a part of the self in the stone, to join one's spirit with the cave, to mark belonging in the unseen. Even now, when you stand before such prints, you feel the intimacy. You are palm to palm with someone who lived 30,000 years ago, their presence whispering through time. The echoes of the cave amplified the mystery. A drumbeat on stone could sound like thunder. A chant could stretch into a howl. Imagine a shaman stamping his foot, the sound bouncing back from hidden walls. To the listeners, it was not echo but answer. The cave itself seemed alive, a voice in dialogue. Ritual here was not silent. It was filled with sound, rhythm, vibration, the body and the stone joining in communion. At the deepest points, symbols appear, spirals, zigzags, lattices. To us, they are puzzling, abstract. To them they may have been visions, shapes seen in trance, patterns glimpsed in dreams. When shamans inhaled smoke or entered rhythmic dance, their minds shifted, and these shapes appeared. To carve or paint them was to fix those visions into the world, to prove that the unseen was real. The cave became both memory and prophecy, a book without words. There is humor here too. One drawing from Chauvet shows a lion's body with a strangely human stance, as though caught mid-dance. Was it meant as satire, a playful blending of beast and man? Did laughter ripple through the group as torches lit that wall? Even in sacred spaces, humans could not resist mixing reverence with mischief. Ritual was not always solemn. Sometimes it was joyous, strange, absurd, and always there was danger. To go into the cave was to risk darkness, cold, suffocation. Torches could fail, paths could twist, echoes could confuse. Yet the danger was part of the power. To risk the cave was to prove courage, to step closer to the spirits. Each descent was pilgrimage, initiation, test. Those who returned carried new weight in their eyes, as if marked by the stone itself. Outside, the cave mouth was ordinary, a crack in a hillside. But within, people built meaning. Fires lit, chants sung, pigments pressed into wall. The act of entering was itself a ritual, a passage from daylight to shadow, from life to the underworld. To bury the dead in caves was to return them to this womb of meaning, the earth itself embracing them. To paint within was to inscribe not just art but faith. Archaeologists have found evidence of torches, deliberately extinguished, offerings left in cracks, bones placed with care. Some skulls of animals were arranged on stones, staring outward like guardians. Others were left in alcoves, where dripping water kept them glistening. Each placement whispered of intention. Each intention whispered of belief. And so the cave became a temple long before temples of stone were raised. Its walls were scripture, its echoes hymns, its depth sanctuaries. There were no priests, no altars, no creeds. There was only awe, enacted with pigment and sound. Yet awe was enough. Awe turned walls into holy places, shadows into spirits, echoes into gods. Think of the continuity. For tens of millennia, humans returned to caves, generation after generation, adding new lines, new prints, new marks. Children grew up watching elders paint, and later pressed their own hands against the walls. The cave became a lineage of faith, a family album of belief. Each mark said, "We are here, we believe, we remember." Today, when we visit those caves, we must do so carefully. Breathing too close, touching too often, risks erasing the pigments. Yet even through barriers we feel it, the hush, the reverence, the presence. We lower our voices, our eyes widen, our breath slows. The cave still works its spell. Ritual does not fade, even across 30 millennia. So, as you lie here in the dark of your room, imagine stepping into that flickering chamber, torch in hand, the walls glowing with beasts, and hands and spirals. Imagine the chant rising, the echo answering, the painted horses seeming to move. Imagine yourself pressing your palm against the stone, leaving a red outline, your spirit fixed into the wall. In that moment, you join the first believers who turned caves into cathedrals, shadows into scripture, silence into song. And when you step back into the light, blinking against the sun, you carry something with you. You carry the knowledge that the world is not only what it seems, that meaning can be painted on stone, that belief can echo in the dark. The caves remain silent but alive, whispering to every visitor, "We believed, will you?" The cave mouth closes behind you, and the memory of painted animals and echoing chants clings to your skin like smoke. But when you return to the campfire, the night is not silent. Drums begin to thrum, slow and steady, like a second heartbeat beneath your own. Sparks rise into the air, and the faces around you glow with firelight. Here, beyond the walls of caves and graves, another figure emerges in the story of early belief. The shaman. Neither quite hunter nor quite ordinary, the shaman moves between worlds, a mediator between the known and the unseen. Picture the moment. The drumbeat quickens, and the shaman steps forward, their body painted with ochre, charcoal, perhaps streaks of white ash. Feathers rise from their hair, bones clatter on cords around their neck. They stamp their feet, whirl in circles, and their voice lifts into a chant that rises above the drum. Others join in, their claps and cries weaving a rhythm. Soon the fire seems to answer, flames leaping higher as if stirred by the music. This is no mere performance. It is passage into trance, into spirit, into the liminal place where humans believed the other world began. What gave the shaman their power? Not wealth, not weapons, but the ability to move minds. They learned to slip into altered states, whether through rhythm, breath, plants, or exhaustion. Their eyes rolled back, their bodies trembled, and in those convulsions the group saw proof of contact with the unseen. "They are speaking with the spirits," someone whispered. "They are walking where we cannot." The shaman became guide, healer, interpreter. Their words carried weight, for they were thought to come not from flesh but from gods, ancestors, animals. The trance was more than show. Anyone who has lost themselves in rhythm, who has danced until their vision blurred, knows how the body itself can become doorway. The shamans took that doorway and walked through it. They returned with visions, a stag with glowing eyes, a river that spoke, a voice of the dead. To the group, these visions were not metaphor, but truth. The world was larger than it appeared, and the shaman had proof. In those proofs were born the earliest myths. Imagine the hush as the shaman returned from trance, their breathing ragged, their eyes wide. They spoke slowly, as though words themselves were fragile. "The bison give themselves if we honor them. The river is angry. We must appease it. Your child will live. The spirits promised it." Such words could calm fear, guide action, inspire obedience. Religion here was not commandment, but narrative, and the shaman was its teller. Sometimes, the shaman acted as healer, with herbs gathered from the forest, with smoke blown across wounds, with chants hummed into the ears of the sick. They fought death. Did they understand medicine as we do? No, but their rituals mattered. They gave hope, eased pain, strengthened will, and sometimes the herbs did heal. The smoke did cleanse, the chant did soothe. Healing and faith were never separate. Both worked together. The shaman also shaped memory. At burials they might lead the gestures, sprinkling ochre, calling the spirit forth, guiding it toward the beyond. At hunts they might dance before departure, wearing the mask of the animal, calling its spirit into the circle. At storms they raised their hands to the sky, crying to thunder as if to an angry parent. Through them, every event, death, hunt, storm became dialogue with the invisible. The world was not silent, it was full of voices, and the shaman taught the people how to answer. And of course, as always, there was humor. Imagine the shaman deep in trance, stumbling and landing awkwardly in the firelight. The circle erupts with nervous laughter. One child whispers, "The spirits tripped them." A ripple of chuckles passes through the group, easing tension. Even in the most serious rituals, play and wit lived beside reverence. For laughter, too, is a kind of magic. It keeps fear from swallowing us whole. Anthropologists see echoes of this figure in countless cultures. The Siberian shaman drumming beneath northern lights, the healer of the Amazon inhaling plant smoke, the desert seer painted in ochre and ash. Across continents, separated by oceans, the pattern repeats. Humans invented shamans not by chance, but because our minds demanded interpreters, translators for the mysteries we could not bear alone. Think of what this did for community. In the shaman's presence, fear became structured. A plague was not random, but the work of an angered spirit. A failed hunt was not incompetence, but neglect of ritual. A dream of a dead relative was not imagination, but a visitation. In such interpretations, the unbearable became bearable. Life had rules hidden but decipherable, and the shaman held the key. But with power came danger. Shamans were respected, but also feared. To anger them was to risk sickness, misfortune, spiritual attack. They walked too close to the other side, and sometimes their own people watched them with unease. Perhaps that is why shamans often lived at the edge of camp, half inside, half outside, embodying their liminal role. They belonged to the group, yet also to the unseen. The tools of their trade became sacred themselves. The drum that summoned trance, the rattle that mimicked thunder, the mask that made them animal, the bones strung around their neck. These were not mere objects, but conduits, infused with power. To touch them carelessly was taboo. To inherit them was initiation. Each object carried story, memory, presence. Picture the moment when the shaman dons a mask carved of wood, painted with ochre, lined with feathers. The crowd gasps as their face vanishes, replaced by the snout of a bear or the horns of a stag. They are no longer themselves. They are spirit embodied. When they dance, they are not mimicking, but becoming. For a few heartbeats, the animal itself has entered the circle. Awe grips the watchers, and belief deepens. It is in these moments that religion ceases to be only reaction to fear and becomes performance of connection. The shaman shows the people that they are not alone, that every force has voice, that death itself can be spoken with. Whether true or imagined does not matter. What matters is the transformation in the hearts of those watching, the sense that the world is alive with unseen presence, and that they have a way to touch it. And when the ritual ends, when the drums fall silent, when the shaman collapses, sweating and gasping, the fire returns to its ordinary crackle. The people disperse, whispering of what was seen, what was promised, what was feared. The night closes in again, but it is not the same night as before. It is a night threaded with meaning, with unseen companions. The shaman has woven the invisible into the fabric of life. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine sitting by that fire, the drum beating like your heart, the figure before you painted, trembling, transformed. Imagine the awe, the fear, the laughter, the belonging. Imagine believing that through them, you too had touched the spirits. In that moment, religion was not distant doctrine, but immediate presence, alive in rhythm, smoke, and story. And perhaps, in the stillness of your room now, you can still hear the echo of that drum carrying belief across millennia. The fire burns low, its coals glowing like a bed of watchful eyes. Beyond the camp, darkness presses close. You hear the snap of branches, the pad of heavy paws, even now with flames between you and the night. Your skin prickles, the animals are near, not just as prey or threat, but as something more. In the minds of early humans, beasts were not mere meat on legs. They were powers, guardians, sometimes rivals, sometimes teachers. In their shapes and movements, people glimpsed the sacred, and so animals became the first gods. Think of the lion in the open grasslands. Its roar carried miles, a sound that vibrated in the chest, commanding silence. To face a lion with nothing but stone-tipped spears was terror itself. Yet when the hunt succeeded, when men returned with a lion's pelt draped across shoulders, awe followed. The skin was not trophy but mantle. To wear it was to take on the lion's strength. The creature was enemy but also ally, an embodiment of force. In art, humans painted lions, not just as animals, but as presences larger than life, symbols of power and fear braided together. The bear, too, loomed in ritual. In caves, bear skulls were arranged with care, placed on stones, staring outward, as if guarding the space. To kill a bear was no small feat. It fought upright, claws flashing, jaws crushing bone. Yet people did not only kill it, they honored it. Some left offerings of meat to its bones, whispering thanks. Others danced in its image, shamans donning skins, growling in trance. The bear was not just an animal, it was a spirit, a relative, perhaps even an ancestor. Its cycle of hibernation and return mirrored death and rebirth. Through the bear, people glimpsed immortality. And then the bison, thunder on hooves, muscle rolling beneath hide, herds stretching across the horizon. To hunt them was to risk trampling, goring, destruction. Yet their meat fed many, their hides clothed the group, their bones became tools painted on cave walls. Bison stand massive, their backs arched, their eyes wide. In torchlight they seem to move, to breathe. Some scholars think the paintings were hunting magic, calling the herds close, but perhaps they were also worship, honoring the spirit of the bison so that balance could continue. To take life without respect was unthinkable. To honor life through image was survival's covenant. Smaller creatures, too, held meaning. The snake, slithering silently through grass, shedding its skin to renew itself. To see such transformation was to witness mystery, death and rebirth in one body. The raven, black against the sky, scavenger of corpses, yet clever and watchful. Its croak at dawn could seem like prophecy. Even insects, ants moving in lines, bees buzzing in swarms, revealed patterns that whispered of hidden order. To early eyes, all movement carried meaning. No creature was without spirit. Around the fire, people told stories of these beings. The lion is the voice of the night. The bear sleeps to dream for us. The snake walks between life and death. These were not idle metaphors. They were explanations, anchors in a world too vast and frightening. In the gestures and habits of animals, people read messages from the unseen. Religion was not only in the sky, it was in the fur and claw, the wing and hoof. Shamans took this further. They wore masks with antlers, cloaks of feathers, claws strung around their necks. In trance, they mimed the gait of animals, bending like wolves, leaping like stags, swaying like cranes. To watch them was to believe that the animal itself had entered the circle. For those moments, man and beast blurred, and the boundary between species dissolved. The people felt themselves kin to the animals, bound in one web of life and spirit. And perhaps there was humor, too. Picture a shaman in a bear skin, growling solemnly only to trip on the hem and tumble into the fire's edge. The crowd bursts into laughter, children squealing. The spell is broken for a moment, but in the laughter lies affection. The animal, even in play, is family. To laugh at it is not disrespect, but closeness. Belief was not fragile. It was strong enough to hold both reverence and jest. The importance of animals was also written in bones. Graves show antlers laid across bodies, claws tied to wrists, feathers tucked into hair. These were not mere decorations, they were tokens of transformation, gifts for the journey beyond. To bury a hunter with antlers was to say, "You will walk as stag in the other world." To lay feathers on a child was to say, "You will fly free of the earth." Through animals, humans imagined afterlives. The hunt itself became ritual. Before setting out, the group might gather, chanting, painting animals on stone, dancing their movements. To wound a creature without honor was taboo, its spirit might return in vengeance. But to kill with reverence, to thank its bones, was to keep the covenant. In this way, hunting was never only about meat, it was dialogue, transaction, sacrifice. Religion and survival were entwined. Over time, the stories grew richer. The lion was no longer just a beast, it was a guardian of the sun. The bear was not only animal but ancestor who once walked as man. The snake was not only rebirth but trickster, slipping between worlds. These were the seeds of mythology. In them, humans began to weave pantheons, giving names and faces to the powers that prowled their nights. And yet, even now, we feel these echoes. Lions still rule our imagination as kings. Bears still fill our dreams with power and danger. Bison still thunder in the collective memory of plains. Snakes still slither into our fears. Ravens still croak like omens. We no longer depend on them for survival, but their spirits live in our stories, our flags, our mascots, our symbols. We are still painting bison on walls. Only now the walls are pages, screens, myth. Animals taught us awe, fear, kinship. They were teachers, foes, protectors, gods. In their eyes, humans saw mirrors of their own struggles, hunger, survival, death, renewal. By honoring them, we honored ourselves, and by weaving them into belief, we acknowledged that we were not separate but part of the same mystery. So tonight, as the fire fades in your room, imagine the darkness alive with eyes, a lion watching from the grass, a bear moving in the trees, a bison herd rolling like thunder across the plain. Imagine the shaman's dance, feathers trembling, antlers high, voice echoing in chant. Imagine the laughter when he stumbles, the hush when he rises again. This was religion, not temples, not scriptures, but reverence for the furred, the winged, the scaled. And as you drift towards sleep, listen for the sounds beneath silence, the pad of paws, the rustle of wings, the hiss of scales. For the first believers, those were not noises but voices. The world itself spoke through animals, and in listening, humanity learned how to believe. The camp grows still after the shaman's dance. The fire settles into embers, casting only a faint glow on the circle of faces. But just beyond the warmth, another kind of presence lingers. Not beast, not storm, not fire. These are presences that were once people. The memory of the dead hovers like breath in the cold air. And here, in the quiet between heartbeat and shadow, belief in ancestors is born. At first, the awareness is simple. A body lies, breathless, stiff, yet the memory of their voice, their gait, their laughter refuses to vanish. You hear them in dreams. You glimpse them in flickers of shadow. You feel them in sudden winds that stir the grass. They are not gone, not entirely, and so the living begin to treat bones and skulls not as refuse but as bridges, links between this world and another. Archaeologists find skulls carefully preserved, faces plastered, sometimes painted with ochre, eyes inlaid with shells. In early settlements, skulls were kept in homes, placed beneath floors, set in alcoves. Imagine sleeping above the head of a grandfather, knowing he listened still. Far from horror, this was comfort. To keep the skull was to keep the bond alive, to say, "You are still among us." In some places, bones were arranged in circles, as though the ancestors themselves gathered around the living. In others, skulls were stacked, a watchful library of faces. Each skull carried memory. This one hunted the stag, that one sang the long song, another healed the sick. To look upon them was to remember, to teach the young, to anchor the tribe in lineage. Belief here was not abstract theology, but continuity of blood and memory. Imagine the rituals. A woman lifts her child and shows him the skull of his ancestor. This was your mother's mother, she still guards you. The child, wide-eyed, touches the smooth dome, half in fear, half in reverence. The lesson sinks deep. We are not alone. The dead walk with us. Their bones are not silence, but testimony. Of course, there was unease too. A skull could comfort, but it could also watch. To anger an ancestor was to risk misfortune. Illness might be explained as their displeasure, a broken spear as their warning. Thus rituals of appeasement grew. Food was offered, beads laid beside bones. Firelight shone on skulls so they would not sit in darkness. Care was not only love, it was insurance. And yet there was affection as well. Some skulls were painted with smiles, adorned with shells like jewelry. In them we see not only fear but intimacy, the desire to beautify the dead, to keep them companionable. In this, early humans revealed something deeply tender. Belief was not only about control, but about love that refused to die. Consider how ancestors shaped identity. To say, "We are the children of the hunter whose skull lies here," was to claim power, story, belonging. Groups defined themselves not only by land or food, but by lineage. Religion here became history, carried not in books but in bones. Skulls were libraries, graves were chronicles, memory was scripture. One can imagine the shaman, during trance, cradling a skull and speaking in another voice. The group leaned forward, listening as though the ancestor himself had returned to speak advice, warning, blessing. Whether or not the shaman deceived them mattered little. The words filled the silence, and belief filled the heart. Through the skull the dead were present, and yes, humor found a way here too. Picture a child slipping a flower into the hollow of a skull's eye socket, giggling. The adults chuckled, shaking their heads, saying, "Even she enjoys the joke." For even the dead could be teased lightly, affectionately. Laughter did not dissolve reverence. It wove through it, keeping fear from hardening into paralysis. Over generations, ancestor rituals became more elaborate. Entire houses of the dead were built, bones stored together, arranged with care. The living visited them, sang songs, poured libations of water or blood. Some even carried skulls in processions, as though walking with their kin. In each act was the conviction that the dead were not past, but present, woven into the fabric of every hunt, every harvest, every storm. The presence of ancestors also deepened the concept of morality. If the dead watched, then one's actions mattered beyond life. To betray kin, to shirk duty, was to dishonor those who still saw. Ancestors became the first judges, their invisible eyes shaping behavior. Religion thus became not only about appeasing gods, but about honoring the dead, ensuring that their memory and their judgment endured. Even now, echoes of this belief remain. We visit graves, leave flowers, keep photographs on mantels. We whisper to portraits, light candles for the departed, carry heirlooms as though they still hold spirit. The skulls beneath ancient floors were not so different from the photographs above ours. The impulse is the same, to keep the dead close, to insist that memory is more than silence. The skull itself carries strange power. Its empty sockets seem to see. Its grin seems eternal. To early humans, this was not macabre, but magical. Flesh rots, but bone endures. To hold a skull was to hold permanence, the enduring presence of one who once lived. No wonder it became sacred, a symbol of continuity, a vessel of the unseen. And so, around the fire, the skulls glowed faintly in torchlight. They listened, they judged, they blessed. The living danced, sang, prayed, whispered. Together they formed a chorus, past and present entwined, lineage and ritual fused. Religion here was not worship of distant gods, but intimacy with those who once held your hand, whose voice you still heard in dreams. So as you drift into rest tonight, imagine lying in a small dwelling, the floor beneath you warm with the memory of fire, and beneath that floor, skulls arranged carefully. They are not frightening. They are kin, guardians, companions. You close your eyes knowing that you do not sleep alone. The ancestors are here. They always will be. The river glitters beneath the moonlight, its surface restless with silver ripples. You crouch at its edge, cupping cool water into your palms. The sound is steady, eternal, a language older than words. For early humans, rivers, mountains, springs, and groves were never just landscapes. They were alive, watching, listening. Certain places were not simply useful. They were sacred. The natural world held thresholds where the invisible pressed close, and people marked them with offerings. Take the river itself. It nourished with fish, quenched thirst, carried bodies in boats, but it could also flood, drown, sweep away camps. To treat it as mere water was folly. Instead, it was honored as a being, a spirit with moods. When the hunt succeeded, bones were tossed into the current. When sickness struck, herbs were scattered on its surface, whispered prayers trailing with the flow. To kneel at a river's edge was to kneel before a god. Springs bubbling endlessly from stone drew awe. Where water welled up from unseen depths, people saw portals, veins connecting to the underworld. Offerings of beads, tools, even animal bones were dropped into their mouths. To drink from such springs was not just thirst's answer but communion. To leave a gift was to acknowledge that you drank from the veins of the earth itself, that you owed a debt to the unseen. Mountains loomed as guardians. Their peaks were unreachable, lost in clouds, where storms brewed and lightning struck. To climb them was dangerous, yet even from afar they commanded reverence. Some groups faced mountains during rituals, lifting hands as though in greeting. Others buried their dead in foothills, believing the souls would rise with the peaks into the sky. A mountain was not a pile of rock. It was a body, a presence, the stairway to the divine. Groves too became holy. To step into a ring of trees where light barely pierced, where the air smelled of resin and moss, was to feel watched. Some groves were left untouched, no trees felled, no animals hunted, as if the place itself forbade harm. Others became sites of gathering, where chants echoed among trunks and dances stirred fallen leaves. The grove was a cathedral without walls, where pillars were alive and leaves were the roof. Archaeological finds show objects deliberately placed in bogs, rivers, and pits, axes sunk into mud, beads scattered, even human bodies lowered into wetlands. These were not accidents. They were offerings, gifts to the spirits of place. To throw away something precious was paradoxically to keep it, to lodge it in memory, to bargain with forces larger than oneself. Consider the act. A hunter drops a beautifully napped spearhead into the river. His friends murmur, confused. Why waste such a tool? But he explains. The river gave fish. The river carried him safely last season. The river must be honored. In that gesture, the tribe learns generosity to the unseen, sacrifice for balance. The loss of the spear is gain in meaning. Some sacred sites were marked with stones arranged in circles, cairns piled high, paths lined with bones. These markings were not houses but signposts. Here the spirits dwell, To walk past was to feel their gaze. To pause was to show respect. To linger, singing or laying down food, was to join the conversation. Even without temples, the landscape itself became altered. And yet, humor played its role. Imagine a boy tasked with tossing beads into the spring. Nervous, he slips and drops the whole pouch. His friends laugh, saying, "The spirits are greedy tonight." The spring is fed, the laughter eases tension, and belief continues. For even in reverence, humans could not resist teasing the gods a little. Sacred places also ordered life. The river's floods became omens. Good harvest, bad fortune, divine wrath. The mountain's storm was not weather but judgment. The grove's silence was warning. In interpreting these signs, shamans and elders guided the group. The sacred sites were not just places but calendars, compasses, barometers of meaning. These rituals tied groups to their land. To honor a spring was to claim it. To bury ancestors near a mountain was to anchor identity there. Sacred sites became boundaries of belonging. To leave them was exile. To desecrate them was war. Religion, born of rivers and stones, grew into geography of identity. Think of how this endures. Even now, mountains are climbed for pilgrimage, rivers blessed in festivals, trees decorated at solstices. We no longer believe as they did, yet our instincts remain. We still feel hush in forests, awe on peaks, peace by rivers. The sacred clings to landscape like mist that never burns away. Offerings carried memory too. When a bead was tossed into a spring, future generations found it glinting in the shallows and remembered our ancestors honored here. Each offering was both prayer and monument, both dialogue with spirits and inheritance for descendants. The land itself became scripture, written not in ink but in stone and water, and the more offerings given, the more power the place seemed to hold. A river with hundreds of beads became a river of immense spirit. A grove with countless bones became a grove of heavy presence. Each gift fed the site, swelling its importance, creating centers of ritual long before cities rose. Perhaps most powerful was the idea that these places connected worlds. A spring was a mouth into the underworld. A mountain peak was a bridge to the heavens. A grove was a meeting place of earth and sky. To visit them was to step close to thresholds, to thin places where the veil weakened. Here, living might touch the dead, mortals might brush gods, silence might carry voices. So tonight, as you lie listening to the hum of your own world, picture yourself at a river's edge. Thousands of years ago, you drop a shell into the current, watch it swirl, disappear, whispering thanks. You feel the river take it, feel the presence watching, nodding. The offering costs you, but it binds you. The river flows on, eternal, and in its endless song you hear belief made visible. The fire is built higher tonight, not for warmth, but for rhythm. Around it, men and women gather in a wide circle, their feet bare on packed earth. The first beats of a drum echo, slow as a heartbeat, then faster, until every chest vibrates with its pulse. Voices join, low at first, then rising. The dancers begin to move, stamping, swaying, spinning in arcs. This is not exercise, not mere celebration. This is ritual. Through dance, the group binds itself together, imitates the powers they fear and honor, and steps into a space where movement becomes prayer. Picture the circle widening as more bodies join. Hands clap in sync. Sticks strike the ground. Breath comes in gasps. Children mimic the adults, awkward at first, then finding rhythm. No one watches from the side. Everyone participates. The dance belongs to the whole. In its weaving steps, the tribe remembers hunts, storms, births, and deaths. Feet pound out memory. Arms sketch myths into air. Dance is not distraction. It is the first temple. Often the dance takes its form from animals. A hunter bends low, arms out, mimicking the stalk of a lion. Others follow, growling, pouncing, their shadows stretching wild against the fire. Then they shift. Someone leaps like a stag, antlers of branches held high, while the rest chase with spears, their laughter edged with reverence. By imitating animals, the dancers call their spirits close, honor them, plead for luck in the hunt. The dance is incantation in movement. Storms are mimicked too. Dancers stamp harder, thunder on the earth. They spin in spirals, arms sweeping, hair flying, voices shouting like wind. The drum quickens, rattles hiss like rain, sparks burst upward like lightning. For those watching, though in truth none are mere watchers, the storm is not outside, it is here, embodied. In this performance, humans do not only describe nature, they become it. The trance deepens. As the circle moves faster, breath comes ragged, sweat runs down painted faces, some collapse, trembling, overcome, eyes wide with visions. Others laugh, ecstatic, as if lifted from their bodies. In this shared exhaustion, barriers fall. Fear, anger, sorrow, all dissolve into the rhythm. The group becomes one body, one pulse. And in that unity, belief grows that something larger than themselves has joined them, moving through their limbs, carried in their step. There is no sermon here, no written creed. The doctrine is the drum. The scripture is the step. The theology is the circle itself. Bodies bound in rhythm. To dance together is to believe together. Every movement is repetition, and repetition breeds memory, and memory births ritual. Soon it is not only celebration but obligation. When the hunt begins, the dance must be done. When a child is born, the dance must be offered. When death comes, the dance must carry the soul. Laughter is never far. One dancer trips, colliding with another, and the circle erupts in giggles. A child runs through the middle, flapping arms like a bird, earning cheers. Even mistakes become part of the ritual, folded into its rhythm, for belief is not brittle. It flexes. It holds both reverence and play. Joy is as sacred as fear. Over time, the dances become codified. Certain steps repeat. Certain gestures signify. Arms raised to the sky mean invocation. Feet stamping in rhythm mean calling ancestors. Circling clockwise honors the sun's path. Counterclockwise invokes night or death. Symbols are carried in movement, remembered by bodies long before writing etched them in stone. The dance is archive, memory written not on paper but in muscle. Anthropologists note how circle dances persist across cultures. In deserts, forests, tundras, islands, always the same pattern, humans forming a ring, stamping, clapping, chanting. Why? Because the circle is equality. The circle has no center but the fire. The circle binds every participant. To dance in a line is to separate. To dance in a circle is to join. The shape itself is ritual, endless and eternal. Some dances serve healing. The sick are placed at the center, and the circle moves around them, stamping, chanting, raising dust and heat. The rhythm grows until sweat drips, and in that furnace of sound and motion, the sickness is coaxed out, the spirit strengthened. Whether the cure was physical or psychological mattered little. The dance worked because it was believed, and belief itself had power. Others served warfare. Warriors painted with ash danced before departure, miming strikes, shouting, thrusting spears into the air. Their fear burned off in rhythm, their courage grew with each step. By the end, they were not individuals, but one force, one army, their hearts beating to the same drum. Dance became weapon before weapons were raised. Even children's games fed into ritual. Little ones circled each other, clapping, chanting nonsense that echoed the adults' chants. Without knowing, they rehearsed the rhythms of belief. By the time they grew, the steps were second nature. Religion was not taught in doctrine, but in play, in song, in motion. It was lived before it was explained. Sacred places often hosted sacred dances. At the foot of mountains, on riverbanks, in groves, circles stamped patterns into soil year after year, until the earth itself remembered. Depressions formed where feet had pounded, stones shifted where circles spun. To return was to feel the weight of generations, to dance where ancestors had danced, to become part of an unbroken chain. Even in caves alongside painted animals, traces of soot and scuff marks suggest dances were performed within. Imagine the echo of stamping feet, the flicker of torchlight on walls, the bison and horses seeming to leap as the dancers whirled. Art, chant, movement, all merged. The cave was theatre, temple, womb of ritual. And what of failure? When a hunt ended poorly despite the dance, when sickness claimed lives despite the healing circle, belief did not shatter. Instead, it deepened. Perhaps the steps had not been perfect, the rhythm not steady, the offerings not enough. Ritual was rarely disproved. It was refined, and in that refinement, dances grew more complex, more codified, more essential. Even today, echoes remain. We dance at weddings, at funerals, at festivals. We sway to music without knowing why it moves us. We circle fires at campsites, clap with friends, stamp our feet at concerts. The ancient circle has not gone. It lingers in our bodies, in the way rhythm unites us, in the way motion gives us meaning. So, as you drift now into rest, imagine yourself in that circle, bare feet on earth, drums shaking your chest. Feel the rhythm gather you into the group, your body moving without thought, your laughter joining chants. The fire throws sparks like stars, and for a moment you are not alone, not separate. You are one pulse in the great circle of humanity, dancing belief into being. The fire has burned low again, the circle of dancers collapsing into laughter, breathless bodies sprawled on the earth. Slowly, the frenzy fades into quiet, and the camp gathers close once more around the glowing embers. This is when the stories come. Faces lean in, eyes reflecting flame, ears straining in the hush of night. The first religions were not written in scripture but spoken in whispers, woven from fear, loss, and wonder, and nowhere were they richer than in the stories told beside fire about death. Why it came, where it led, what it meant. Imagine the hush as an elder clears his throat. His voice is gravelly, but steady. He points toward the flames and begins. Long ago, fire was not ours. It was stolen from the sky by the eagle who carried it in his beak to give us warmth. The children gasp, the flames flicker, as though listening. The story continues, carrying lessons of courage, gratitude, and the sense that even fire itself is not just physical but moral, a gift that must be honored. In the telling, the group learns not only explanation, but obligation. Death, most of all, demanded story. Why did breath stop? Why did the body stiffen? Why did people vanish into silence? The answers came not from dissection, but from imagination. A storyteller might say, the soul is smoke rising from the fire. When you see the smoke curl into the sky, know that someone has left us. Another might tell of a river that carried souls downstream, or a mountain where the dead climbed and never returned. These images soothe grief, making absence less final. The stories gave shape to loss. Children, frightened by death, listened wide-eyed. Where did my brother go? One might ask. The elder would answer gently, he walks now with the ancestors who hunt always, who never hunger. Such words were not truth in a scientific sense, but they were truth in meaning. They allowed the living to continue, to weave loss into a narrative that gave comfort. And in that weaving lay the threads of religion. The stories also taught morality. Around the fire, someone told of a man who stole food and upon death was refused entry into the ancestors' feast. Another told of a woman who cared for the sick and whose soul was carried by birds into the sky. Through such tales, behavior was guided. Religion here was not law carved in stone, but parable whispered into ears. The fire was the pulpit, the story the sermon, and yet humour found its place even in death's shadow. An elder might end a grim tale with a wink, and if you snore too loudly, the spirits will mistake you for a bear and drag you off. Laughter erupted, tension eased, and the children relaxed. Jokes about spirits did not break belief, they made it livable. After all, no community can sit forever in solemnity. Religion, to endure, must carry laughter as well as tears. The act of telling itself became ritual. Certain stories could only be told at night, when stars shone and the dead were near. Others belonged to winter, when the world slept, or to harvest, when abundance was explained through myth. The timing mattered. To tell a story at the wrong time risked angering the spirits. Thus the calendar of ritual was born, not in written almanacs, but in the rhythm of storytelling. Notice, too, the role of repetition. A story told once is entertainment. A story told every winter, in the same place with the same words, becomes liturgy. Children who heard it each year knew when to gasp, when to laugh, when to nod. They learned it by heart and passed it on. In this way, religion carried itself not through permanence of stone, but through the constancy of human memory. The firelight itself shaped the experience. Shadows flickered, faces shifted, sparks leapt upward. Listeners saw animals in the smoke, spirits in the shadows, ancestors in the flames. Storytelling was not only words, but theatre. The fire was both stage and actor, shaping belief with its dance. No wonder so many myths spoke of fire as messenger, as soul, as God. Around its glow everything seemed alive. Dreams also wove into stories. When someone dreamed of a dead parent, it was not illusion but visitation. The dream was shared at dawn, added to the firelit tales, folded into communal lore. Dreams proved what stories promised, that the dead were not gone, that the spirit world was real. Belief was not only inherited, it was experienced in nightly visions, then reinforced in storytelling circles. Through stories, the world itself became narrative. Thunder was not noise, but a god's voice. The moon was not rock, but a watchful face. Stars were not distant suns, but campfires of the ancestors. To live in such a world was to live in story, where every event carried intention, every silence was filled with presence. Ritual and myth were inseparable. And think of the power this gave. A skilled storyteller could inspire courage before a hunt, soothe despair after a death, settle disputes by invoking ancestral judgment. Their words carried authority because they were not just stories, they were believed to be true echoes of the unseen. To speak them was to shape reality. In this way, storytellers were priests. Long before priests existed, the fire became archive. Each night layered story upon story until the past stretched deep. Children grew up with myths older than their grandparents, myths that linked them not only to their people but to the world. To forget a story was dangerous. It risked breaking continuity. Thus memory itself became sacred. Elders who held stories were guardians of faith. Even small tales mattered. A child's funny dream, retold with gestures, became part of the law. A mistake in a hunt, explained as the trick of a spirit, grew into warning myth. Religion did not descend fully formed. It accreted, like ash building layer upon layer around a fire pit. Each telling was a spark, and together they became flame. Over time, these fireside myths seeded larger traditions. The eagle who stole fire became god of flame. The river carrying souls became god of death. The mountain climbed by the dead became stairway to heaven. From simple explanations grew pantheons, and from pantheons grew temples. But even when carved into stone, the heartbeat of religion remained the same. The circle of listeners, the flicker of flame, the hush of story. Even now you know the echo. We still gather around lights, not only fires but lamps, screens, stages. We still tell stories of death, of gods, of ancestors. We still hush children with parables. We still laugh at jokes about spirits. The ritual is ancient, but it endures. Storytelling is humanity's first religion. The way we taught ourselves that the world was not random, that meaning could be made. So tonight, as your own room grows quiet, imagine leaning into the warmth of a fire thousands of years ago. Sparks rise, shadows stretch, a voice begins. You listen, heart beating to the rhythm of words older than memory. In that voice, you feel comfort, awe, fear, laughter. You feel belief being born. You close your eyes, the story still humming in your ears, carrying you into dreams where ancestors walk, spirits whisper, and fire itself speaks. The night is cool, the fire steady, and the circle of listeners grows quiet again. The elder has finished his tale of death and smoke, and now the hunters shift forward, eager for another story, one closer to their daily struggle. The fire's glow glints on the tips of their spears, and in their eyes burns the urgency of hunger. For in early belief, food was never only food. The hunt itself was sacred. The animals pursued not just as prey but as beings bound in covenant, and so arose the gods of the hunt, spirits who demanded respect and answered only to ritual. Picture the hunters gathered before dawn, their bodies painted with streaks of red ochre. One kneels and sketches the outline of a stag in the dirt, tracing antlers with careful hand. Another sprinkles ash upon the drawing, whispering words meant to draw the animal's spirit near. A third sharpens his spear but pauses to blow softly on the blade, as though feeding it breath. These are not empty gestures, they are prayers, binding the hunters to the beings they seek. To kill without ritual was to invite failure. To honor with ritual was to ensure the herd's return. In painted caves, bison and deer crowd the walls, their bodies swelling with life. Some show arrows or spears piercing them, lines drawn as if predicting the hunt's success. Were these art for art's sake? Unlikely. They were invocations, magic by image. To draw the animal was to summon it, to trap its spirit in pigment, to tilt fate toward the hunters. The cave became a hunting ground of symbols, where victory was rehearsed before spears ever flew. The hunt itself carried ritual rhythm. The approach was silent, feet soft on grass, breaths shallow. A whispered chant might rise. Come, come, give yourself to us. Spears lifted in unison were not only weapons but offerings, each thrust a petition. And when the animal fell, there was no cheer. Instead, there was pause. The hunters stood in respect, touching the blood, murmuring thanks. Some placed hands on the body, as though absorbing its strength. Some plucked tufts of hair to keep as tokens. Every act acknowledged. Life had been taken. Debt was owed. Afterward, the body was carried back with solemnity. Meat was shared carefully, bones cracked for marrow, hide stretched for clothing, nothing wasted, not merely for practicality, but for reverence. To waste was insult. To honor the animal was to honor the spirit that would send more. Thus religion was stitched into every bite of meat, every strip of hide. Survival itself was ritual. At times, offerings were left beside carcasses, a spear stuck upright in the ground, a bead laid on fur, a fire lit in silence. These were gifts to the animal's spirit, signs of gratitude. Some tribes believed the spirit would return to the herd, telling others, "They honored me, they deserve more." Others thought the spirit would watch over the camp, protecting them. Whatever the form, the gesture turned necessity into covenant. The gods of the hunt were not distant deities, but the animals themselves. The stag, who leapt and vanished, was a spirit teasing. The bison, who charged and scattered hunters, was a god angry. The hare that darted across the path was an omen. Every hoofprint, every cry in the night, was message. Hunters did not only track animals, they listened to gods. The rituals grew elaborate. Before hunts, shamans donned masks with antlers, dancing on all fours, snorting, pawing the ground. Others painted bison on their chests, stamped like hooves. The hunters circled, mimicking the chase, rehearsing in body what they hoped to enact in field. The line between preparation and prayer blurred. To move as animal was to join with its spirit, to merge hunter and hunted into one rhythm, and inevitably, laughter joined reverence. Imagine a man tripping in his stag mask, falling into the dirt. The group roared with mirth. Someone joked, "The deer surrenders early." Even in mockery, the belief strengthened. The laughter released fear, turning anxiety into solidarity. Humor, again, was not the enemy of ritual, but its companion, keeping spirits buoyant. Over generations, myths explain the covenant. Some said animals gave themselves willingly, so long as their bones were honored. If bones were broken carelessly, the herd would vanish. Others said a great hunter in the sky lent his game to mortals, demanding gifts in return. Still others told of a first animal, a divine being who allowed its body to be eaten so humans could live, and who resurrected each season in herds and flocks. These were not idle tales, they were cosmologies of survival. The rituals shaped morality too. To kill more than needed was taboo, greed punished by famine. To kill young or pregnant animals was forbidden, a crime against the herd's spirit. Religion here was conservation before the word existed, ethics woven into survival. The gods of the hunt were not only worshipped, they were regulators of balance. Feasts after hunts became ceremonies. Fires roared, meat roasted, songs rose. Yet always, the first portion was set aside, cast into fire or river, given back to the unseen. Children were told, "This is the share for the gods." To eat before the offering was sacrilege. Through such gestures, gratitude was drilled into the bones of the young. Consider how these practices echo even now. Hunters still speak of respecting their prey. Meals still begin with blessings. We still tell stories of animals sacrificed, of divine lambs, of sacred stags. The covenant of the hunt lingers in culture long after spears gave way to farms. Belief is sticky. It clings to memory, shaping even those who think themselves free of it. At its heart, the gods of the hunt taught humans humility. The animal was not victim, but partner. The kill was not triumph, but gift. Life depended not on dominance, but on reciprocity. To forget this was to starve. To remember it was to thrive. In this balance, belief was not optional, it was survival. So tonight as you rest, imagine kneeling beside a stag freshly fallen, your hand pressed to its flank, still warm. You whisper thanks, your breath mingling with the last breath of the animal. You feel awe, sorrow, gratitude, fear. You know that tomorrow the herd may not return, that the covenant must be kept. The firelight waits at camp, the songs ready to rise, and you walk back slowly, carrying both meat and meaning, both body and spirit. In the hush of your room now, you may still hear it, the chant before dawn, the stamp of feet, the crack of spears. The gods of the hunt are not gone. They live in our rituals of gratitude, in our prayers before meals, in our stories of sacrifice. They live in the memory of hunger, when every kill was covenant and every bite was sacred. The camp grows larger now, no longer a cluster of hide tents or caves, but something more enduring. The people return to the same place each season, drawn by the abundance of game, the fertile soil, the meeting of rivers. Over time, stones are stacked, not as hearths or walls alone, but as markers, circles, pillars, and one day, almost without realizing it, humanity raises its first temples. Not palaces for kings, not shelters for families, but spaces set apart, built only for belief. Imagine the dawn breaking over the hills of what we now call southeastern Turkey, some 12,000 years ago. Hunters and gatherers who once wandered the plains have begun to gather at a place we name Göbekli Tepe. There, massive stones, taller than men, are dragged upright, arranged in circles. On their surfaces, animals are carved, foxes slinking, vultures spreading wings, snakes twisting like rivers. These pillars are not practical. They do not keep out rain or store grain. They are symbols, monuments, altars. Something new has stirred, the idea that humanity can build space not for survival but for the sacred. The effort is staggering. Hundreds of people labor together, hauling stones with ropes, livering them upright, carving them with painstaking care. Why? To please gods, to summon spirits, to bind communities, all at once. The work itself is ritual, the sweat, the song, the strain, all part of offering. Each stone is prayer turned physical, each circle a hymn of limestone. Once raised, the space takes life. Fires are lit between the stones, dancers circle, shamans chant, offerings are laid. Bones of gazelles and boars are scattered, their meat roasted and shared. The pillars loom, silent witnesses to ceremony. In their presence, people feel both small and immense, small against the weight of stone, immense against the backdrop of meaning. They have built not only a place, but a cosmos, a map of belief etched into earth. Temples like this emerge across the world in time, stone circles in Europe, mounds in the Americas, shrines in Asia. Each one is different, yet all echo the same truth. Humans now give permanence to ritual. Belief is no longer only spoken in caves or danced by firelight. It is inscribed into the land. To build a temple is to declare that the sacred deserves its own domain, apart from the ordinary. The temple gathers people. Tribes who once scattered now converge. They bring gifts, grain, meat, beads, obsidian blades, laying them before stones. In doing so, they also bring themselves. Feasts swell, alliances form, marriages are arranged. The temple becomes not only house of gods, but heart of community. Religion and society entwine, each feeding the other. Stories deepen. The carvings on the stones are read as messages. The fox is cunning, the vulture carries souls, the snake slithers between worlds. Myths grow around them, retold in whispers as fire crackles against stone. This pillar is the ancestor who first taught us the hunt. This circle is the sky, these carvings are the stars. What began as gesture becomes doctrine, a shared map of meaning etched in stone. And still, humor lingers. Picture a child imitating a vulture's pose carved on a pillar, flapping arms wildly until the crowd laughs, or a worker hauling stone who mutters, "The gods had better notice this one." Laughter softens strain, keeps labor human. Even amid reverence, people remain themselves, joking, teasing, balancing awe with play. Over generations, temples teach permanence. Before, belief was tied to seasons and movements. Now stone anchors it. A temple does not vanish when storytellers die. It endures. Children grow up seeing the same pillars their grandparents raised. Ritual becomes tradition. Tradition becomes heritage. The temple turns fleeting moments into lasting memory. But permanence also demands guardians. Someone must tend the fires, interpret the carvings, keep the stories straight. Shamans become priests, their authority solidified by stone. The temple grants them power, not only spiritual, but social. They decide when rituals are held, which offerings are proper, what stories mean. Religion begins to formalize, shaping hierarchy as much as belief. And yet, at its core, the temple remains a place of awe. Imagine standing in the circle at night, torches flickering, shadows climbing the carved animals. The stones loom like giants, silent yet alive. You feel the weight of countless hands that raised them, the breath of countless voices that prayed here. You sense that you are part of something vast, both behind and before you. The temple is not only stone, it is time itself, frozen and eternal. The rise of temples also shifts humanity's relationship with land. No longer is every grove or river equally sacred. Now one place is chosen, marked, monumental. Pilgrimage is born. People travel distances to stand among stones, to lay offerings, to dance in the circle. The temple gathers memory and disperses it, binding distant groups into shared ritual. Religion spreads not only through story but through architecture, and with architecture comes imagination. Temples are not merely copies of Earth, they are models of cosmos. A circle of stones becomes the wheel of seasons. A mound becomes the mountain of creation. A pillar becomes the axis between heaven and underworld. By building, humans map belief onto stone, giving form to the invisible. The earliest temples lack roofs, walls, or statues, yet in their openness lies their power. Sky itself is the ceiling, stars the lamps, wind the hymn. To stand within is to stand in a frame that turns nature into cathedral. Over time, roofs will rise, idols will be carved, incense will burn, but the essence remains. To gather in a place made sacred by human hands, to meet gods through stone and story. Even now, echoes remain. We still raise monuments, carve names, light candles. We still travel to sacred places, whether cathedral, shrine, or memorial. We still feel awe in spaces shaped for meaning. Göbekli Tepe and Stonehenge may crumble, but their spirit persists in every church bell, every minaret, every candlelit shrine. The temple never vanished, it only evolved. So tonight, as you drift into rest, imagine walking among those first stone circles. The air is sharp, the stars bright, fires flicker, drums sound, voices chant. The pillars rise above you, carved with beasts that seem alive in shadow. You lay a bead at the base of stone, feel its chill against your palm, whisper thanks. Around you, the community sways, bound not by blood alone but by belief. And in that circle of stone and flame, you sense it, the birth of temples, the moment humans learn to build not only shelters for bodies, but houses for gods. The stones stand tall, but what they enclose is more than carved animals and echoing chants. Over time, something subtler grows within the hearts of those who gather, the recognition that rituals themselves create belonging. To smear ochre on a face, to stamp feet in rhythm, to tell a story by fire, to dance before pillars, these are not only acts of faith, but also signals of identity, belief. Once individual becomes shared, religion becomes the thread that binds tribe to tribe, family to family. Picture two groups meeting at the edge of a river. Their dialects differ, their customs are not the same, but when one traces ochre across his brow and the other responds with the same gesture, something stirs. They are strangers, yet the pigment says, we both honor the unseen. They join in a dance, awkward at first, but soon their feet beat the same ground. By the time they part, they are less enemies than kin. The ritual has bound them. This is the quiet power of belief. It creates circles larger than blood. To share ritual is to declare, I am one of you. A child raised within the rites inherits not just stories but membership. Religion becomes a passport, a badge, an anchor, and in this way, it ensures survival. For groups united by ritual withstand hardship better than those fractured by doubt. Symbols mark this unity. A painted handprint is not just art, but a claim. This hand belongs to our people. A carved animal is not merely decoration, but emblem. This beast guards us. As generations repeat the same symbols, they grow heavy with meaning. The spiral, the circle, the cross-hatched pattern, all become shorthand for belonging. To see them is to know who you are. And of course, laughter weaves through identity as much as solemnity. Imagine a boy smeared with ochre for the first time. He sneezes, the powder puffing into the air covering his face unevenly. The others laugh, joking that the spirits like him messy, yet in the laughter lies inclusion. He is teased because he belongs. Religion here is not stiff, but alive, a blend of reverence and joy. The rituals also teach discipline. To dance the same steps, chant the same words, repeat the same gestures requires order. Children learn patience by waiting for their turn in the circle, endurance by stamping until their legs ache, memory by reciting stories. These lessons are not merely spiritual, they shape character. Belief becomes education, teaching how to live together. Over time, the rituals grow more complex. A simple chant becomes a litany, a short dance becomes a night-long festival, a burial becomes multi-day mourning. Complexity itself marks identity. Outsiders may not know the steps, the songs, the symbols. Insiders do. To master them is to prove loyalty. To forget them is to risk exclusion. Religion guards its boundaries as surely as stone walls. Archaeologists find evidence of this in beads worn in distinctive patterns, in carvings repeated across regions, in burial customs that echo from one site to the next. These are not random variations, they are markers, deliberate and persistent, saying, we belong to this group, we follow these spirits, we share this faith. To recognize a pattern is to recognize kin. Rituals also become stories of origin. We dance this way because the ancestors taught it. We paint with ochre because the first hunter did so. Whether true or not is irrelevant. The tale itself cements continuity. Belief is not only about gods, but about identity, about knowing where you came from. To abandon ritual would be to abandon self, and yet identity through belief is double-edged. It binds within, but it divides without. Those who share rituals are kin. Those who do not are strangers, sometimes enemies. Wars and rivalries may spring from this boundary. As much as alliances, religion is glue but also knife. In the earliest moments, however, its binding power outweighed its cutting edge. To survive in a harsh world, unity was lifeblood. Picture a festival at one of the first temples. Fires blaze, drums thunder, feasts spill across the ground. Hundreds gather, some who have not met before. Yet as chants rise in unison, as circles of dance overlap, as offerings are laid together, they are transformed from scattered tribes into a people. The shared ritual smooths differences, erases suspicion. They leave with marriages arranged, hunts coordinated, alliances sealed. The sacred has become political, the temple a parliament of belief. Humor again eases the strain. One man sings out of tune, another stumbles in the dance, and laughter ripples. But the mistake does not weaken the festival, it strengthens it. Shared laughter becomes another ritual, another glue. Belief is not brittle. It survives imperfection because imperfection itself is woven into community. The rituals also mark life's thresholds. A child becomes part of the tribe through initiation. Perhaps a smear of ochre, a cut, a dance. An adult, proves themselves in the hunt through ritual feasts. The dying are sent onward through chants and offerings. Every stage of life is framed by ceremony, each person's story folded into the larger story of the people. Identity is not chosen but enacted, sealed by ritual, and in time, this belonging shapes memory itself. A child who hears the same chants year after year associates them with safety, warmth, belonging. As an adult, they pass them on, not because they understand them fully, but because they cannot imagine life without them. Ritual becomes instinct, inherited like blood. Religion ensures its own survival by embedding itself into the marrow of memory. We still feel this. When a hymn plays, when a bell tolls, when a hand is raised in greeting, we respond with more than thought. We respond with memory. Rituals of identity, born in the first circles of fire, still echo in modern hearts. They remind us who we are, and sometimes who we are not. So tonight, as you rest, imagine standing among your people in a circle of stone, the air filled with chant, the ground trembling with drums. You lift your hands, smeared with ochre, and those around you lift theirs too. You feel the bond, invisible but strong, tying you to them, to ancestors, to gods. You laugh when someone stumbles, you hush when the chant deepens, you sway when the rhythm grows, and in that moment, you are not alone. You are part of a people, bound by ritual, defined by belief. The circle of identity grows tighter, but within it lurks a darker edge. If spirits can be pleased, they can also be angered. If gods grant abundance, they can also withhold, and if ancestors bless, they can also curse. From this truth, another thread of religion emerges: sacrifice, food, beads, fire, and at times blood are offered to unseen powers, not because the community is cruel, but because fear and gratitude both demand giving. The sacred, they believe, must be fair. At first, the offerings are simple. A hunter lays the first cut of meat on the fire, letting smoke curl skyward. A woman drops a handful of berries into the river, whispering thanks. A child sets a pebble beside a stone circle. These gestures cost little, but they carry weight. Each one says, "We know we owe something, we return a share," and in that returning, balance is kept, but hunger for assurance grows. A poor harvest, perhaps the offering was too small. A failed hunt, perhaps the gods were slighted. To calm doubt, the gifts must grow. Grain is poured into flames, tools are buried in soil, necklaces broken and scattered. The greater the need, the greater the sacrifice. Belief teaches that the unseen is powerful, but also fickle, demanding proof of devotion. Imagine a ritual at dusk. The people gather around the fire. At its edge, a goat stands tethered, restless. The shaman steps forward, face painted, hands steady. The goat is killed swiftly, its blood caught in a bowl, poured into the flames. Smoke rises, and the people inhale sharply, waiting. When the wind shifts, carrying the smoke upward, relief floods them. The spirits are pleased, the shaman declares. The goat's flesh is shared, the bones set aside. In this act, fear is soothed, order restored. The sacrifice is not cruelty, but covenant. Life is taken, but with reverence, with ritual, with gratitude. To kill without offering would be waste. To offer without killing would be empty. Only in combination does the act gain sacred weight, and in giving, the people believe they receive rain, meat, health, safety. Sacrifice becomes contract, a negotiation with the unseen. Not all offerings are bloody, many are beautiful. Strings of beads, carved figurines, painted stones are laid in rivers, buried in fields, hidden in caves. The act of giving away what is precious, even useless in practical terms, is itself power. It proves sincerity. It binds the giver to the spirit, and sometimes the beauty of the gift is the prayer itself, color, shape, shine offered to gods who love beauty as much as humans do. There is also sacrifice of time and energy, to fast before a ritual, to dance until exhaustion, to chant until voices crack. All are offerings. The body itself becomes gift, sweat and pain proving devotion. The group sees this and nods. Here is one who has given much, who has suffered for the spirits. Such sacrifice inspires others, strengthens belief, deepens identity. And yes, laughter even here. Imagine a man carrying an offering of fruit to the river, only to slip and spill it early. His friends laugh, teasing. The spirits are greedy tonight. The fruit is gone, but the ritual remains. Humor softens fear, reminding them that offerings are not bribes but conversations. Even gods, they imagine, might chuckle. Yet sometimes fear overwhelms. In times of famine, drought, or plague, the offerings escalate. Grain is not enough. Animals are not enough. In some places, the unthinkable emerges. Human sacrifice. A captive, an outsider, rarely but sometimes even one of their own, given to the spirits. Archaeologists uncover graves where bodies were bound, throats cut, laid with ritual care. These were not murders, but acts of desperate devotion. The community believed only the most precious life could sway the gods. Such acts horrify us, yet they reveal the depth of belief. Religion was not an ornament, but a survival strategy. To risk death was to risk nothing compared to famine. Better to sacrifice one than to lose all. In their minds, it was logic as much as faith, and though rare, these rituals etched themselves into memory. Their echoes carried into later myths of gods demanding blood, of saviors dying for people. Sacrifice also reinforced hierarchy. Priests or shamans alone could declare what offering was needed. They controlled the rituals, directed the gifts, judged the outcomes. Their power grew, because fear and gratitude needed interpreters. Religion here became not only bond, but structure, shaping authority. Those who spoke for gods spoke also for community. The offerings themselves became sacred objects. A bead dropped in the river was no longer just stone, but linked to gods. A goat slain was no longer meat, but covenant. Even ashes of burnt grain were collected, spread on fields to ensure fertility. Sacrifice transformed the ordinary into extraordinary, infusing the world with sacred presence, and sacrifice shaped ethics. To share meat after ritual meant everyone benefited. Not only hunters. To give away beads taught generosity. To fast taught endurance. The act of giving up strengthened the fabric of the group, teaching that survival required selflessness, that the sacred demanded balance, that the unseen was fed only when the seen gave up something of value. Even today, sacrifice remains. We no longer pour goat's blood into fire, but we light candles, fast at festivals, give alms, abstain from pleasures. The principle endures. The sacred requires offering, devotion requires cost. The form has shifted, but the instinct persists. We still feel that gratitude must be shown, that loss can be transformed into gift, that unseen powers must be honored with tangible acts. So tonight as you rest, picture yourself by a river under the stars. You hold a bead carved with care, the only one of its kind. It gleams faintly in moonlight. With a deep breath, you toss it into the current. You watch it sink, vanishing, yet you feel lighter. You have given something, and in giving, you feel closer to the unseen. Around you, your people murmur, nodding. The river flows on, and with it flows your prayer. The smoke of sacrifice lingers in the air, curling upward like a thread tying earth to sky. The people watch it rise, believing it carries their gifts to the unseen. But something is changing. Once, Spirits were everywhere, in rivers, trees, animals, ancestors. Now those spirits begin to gather, to merge, to take shape as something greater. Instead of countless whispers, people begin to imagine voices with names, faces, tempers, and stories. The vague becomes vivid, the scattered becomes pantheon. This is the birth of gods. At first, the shift is subtle. A hunter who once thanked the herd now thanks the great bison. A woman who once whispered to the river now prays to the river mother. Spirits become characters, individuals who can be praised, feared, bargained with. The natural world does not lose its mystery, it gains personalities. The river is no longer an it, but a she. The storm no longer accident, but the roar of Thunderfather. Language itself shapes the unseen into beings. Myths blossom. One storyteller leans into the fire and says, "The sun is a great hunter, chasing the moon across the sky." Another adds, "And when he catches her, the eclipse swallows light." These are not idle tales, but cosmology, ways of ordering chaos. The more vivid the story, the more powerful the belief. Children grow up knowing not only that thunder speaks, but that it is a god angry at broken promises. Adults remind one another not only to give offerings, but to give them to the right god. Pantheons grow, like families, with rivalries, marriages, and births of divine children. The gods are not distant. They are as human as those who imagine them. They hunger, lust, rage, laugh. One god cheats another. One goddess blesses harvests. One trickster steals fire. These stories mirror life, but also elevate it. Through the gods, humans see themselves magnified, their struggles reflected in the sky. Belief becomes theatre of meaning. Each god, a mask for forces too vast to grasp. And still, humor thrives. Imagine a child giggling when told that a trickster spirit farted to create the wind. The adults laugh too, shaking their heads but letting the tale stand. Not all gods are solemn, some are mischievous, their antics teaching lessons through laughter. Religion is not only reverence but storytelling, and storytelling always leaves space for jest. With pantheons come rituals of choice. No longer are offerings scattered vaguely. They are targeted, the first grain to the harvest goddess, the first blood to the war god, the first song to the sky father. Priests emerge to keep track, to remember which god demands what. A wrong offering risks disaster. A forgotten god risks vengeance. Religion grows structured, intricate, like a web. Temples expand. Stones once raised to nameless spirits now bear carvings of gods with faces, beasts, symbols. A pillar with a snake etched upon it is not just snake spirit, it is the shrine of the serpent god. A statue with wide hips and full breasts is not just fertility, it is the mother goddess who births crops and children alike. Where once nature itself was sacred, now representations of gods stand in its place, commanding attention. This shift deepens hierarchy. Priests claim authority, not only as interpreters, but as custodians of divine personalities. They recite genealogies of gods, dictate which offerings are required, retell myths as sacred truths. Religion becomes less fluid, more fixed, yet the people embrace it. For pantheons make the world legible. With gods named, the chaos of life gains order, even if that order is quarrelsome, dramatic, contradictory. The pantheon also reflects the tribe. A warlike people honors war gods. A seafaring people lifts sea deities. A fertile valley imagines a harvest goddess smiling over its fields. Religion is never abstract. It grows from the soil it inhabits. Each group's gods mirror their values, struggles, hopes. To pray is to affirm not only belief, but identity. And yet stories travel. A neighboring tribe speaks of a storm god, and soon he is woven into local myth. perhaps as brother to an existing deity. Myths mingle, pantheons grow. Over centuries, gods proliferate, merge, evolve. The result is not a neat system, but a messy, living web of belief, always shifting, always absorbing. Religion here is less monolith than river delta, branching, splitting, reforming. Some gods rise above others. The storm god who brings rain becomes more important than the trickster who stirs laughter. The harvest goddess eclipses the shadowy death spirit. Hierarchies form, divine as well as human. The great gods demand temples, feasts, festivals. Lesser spirits fade into background, remembered only in whispers. Religion stratifies, reflecting the society it shapes, but for all their grandeur, gods remain close. People imagine them walking in forests, lurking in rivers, hiding in storms. A sudden gust of wind might be a god's laugh, a flash of lightning his anger. Religion does not move heaven far away. It brings heaven down to earth, woven into every moment of life. To live is to live among gods, and through them, morality sharpens. If the hunt fails, perhaps it is because the hunters offended the bison god. If a child thrives, perhaps the mother goddess smiled on the family. Actions matter, not only among humans, but in the gaze of gods. To behave is not only social duty, but divine requirement. Religion becomes law as much as story, its myth shaping ethics, its rituals binding conscience. Still, the gods are not distant rulers. They are kin, flawed and passionate. Their myths mirror love, betrayal, revenge, generosity. In telling them, humans rehearse their own dramas, finding comfort that even divine beings struggle. The gods fight too, an elder says with a smile, and still the world goes on. Belief is not only reverence, but solidarity, with the sacred, with one another, with life itself. And in every myth, humor waits. A god stumbles, a goddess tricks her rival, a trickster turns solemn ceremony into chaos. The listeners laugh, but also nod. For through laughter the gods remain approachable. They are not only powers to be feared, but characters to be loved, mocked, remembered. Religion is not marble and silence, but fire and story, laughter and awe entwined. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine sitting in the glow of a temple fire, listening to a story of gods who hunt, who love, who quarrel. You smile when the trickster steals from the storm god. You frown when the war god rages. You sigh when the mother goddess soothes. You feel yourself part of a lineage, not only of humans but of stories. And in that lineage, belief grows, from spirit to god, from whisper to pantheon. The sacred now has faces, names, tempers, and you too live among them, part of their stories as much as they are part of yours. The pantheon of gods grows crowded, each one woven with stories of hunts, storms, births, and wars. Temples rise taller, chants grow longer, priests grow more insistent, and yet beneath all of it, one truth remains. Belief is not just something ancient humans once held, it is something we still carry. The echoes of those first rituals have never gone silent. They murmur in our prayers, in our festivals, in the way we mark death and birth, in the awe we feel beneath a night sky. Religion and ritual endure, not because gods demand them, but because human hearts do. Consider how little the instinct has changed. We still paint symbols on walls, though now they are frescoes, icons, stained glass. We still tell stories of gods who fight and reconcile, only now written in scriptures. We still gather in circles, churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, our voices rising in chant. We still mark bodies with pigment, ash on foreheads, henna on hands, robes dyed for festivals. The gestures shift, but their meaning is constant. They say, We are not alone. We believe together, and rituals still shape identity. To light a candle, to fast at a holy season, to bow in prayer is to declare belonging. Communities define themselves not only by borders or language, but by shared rituals. The tribe at the river is not gone. It has only expanded into nations, into faiths that span continents. To belong is still to believe, and to believe is still to enact. Sacrifice, too, has not vanished, only softened. We may not pour goat's blood into fire, but we give money to the poor, abstain from food, light incense, dedicate time. The principle endures. To honor the unseen requires giving something up, and though we no longer fear famine from offended spirits, we still feel compelled to offer, as though gratitude requires action. Sacrifice is as much about our own hearts as about God's. The landscapes of the sacred remain as well. Mountains are still climbed for pilgrimage, rivers still blessed, groves still revered. Cathedrals rise where once stood stone circles, yet the awe is the same. Pillars soaring like trees, roofs echoing with chants like wind in leaves. When you enter a holy place and feel your breath slow, your voice hush, your heart tremble, you stand in continuity with those who first stepped into caves lit by flickering torches. Even humor still plays its role. Pilgrims joke about long journeys, priests stumble over prayers, children laugh in pews. Reverence does not erase laughter, it needs it. Just as shamans once tripped in bearskins, so too modern worshippers giggle at the foibles of ritual. The gods, we suspect, can take a joke. Belief is strongest when it bends, when it allows joy as well as solemnity. But beyond continuity lies legacy. Religion gave us more than ritual. It gave us imagination. It taught us to see meaning where none was obvious, to weave story from silence, to build order from chaos. It gave us art, song, architecture, morality. Without belief, there would be no temples, no hymns, no myths to guide or haunt us. The birth of religion was the birth of culture itself, and perhaps the birth of comfort. To live without story is to live in terror of randomness. To believe is to soothe, to soften. When fire was tamed, when burials were painted, when skulls were kept, when dances were stamped, humans were not just surviving, they were reassuring themselves. Ritual is the human way of telling the universe, we see you, we honor you, please do not crush us. That instinct, tender and desperate, still beats in us. Look at the stars. Once they were campfires of ancestors, God's eyes, spirits walking. Now we call them suns, galaxies. Yet when we gaze at them, awe swells in our chest, the same awe that made children press handprints on cave walls. Science explains, but awe endures, and awe, whether pointed at gods or galaxies, is the root of belief. It is easy to think we have moved past the old ways, that temples of stone and caves of ochre are relics, but close your eyes and listen. Hear the rhythm of music at a concert, thousands swaying together. Hear the chanting at a protest, voices uniting in demand. See the candles at a vigil, the silence of bowed heads. These too are rituals, born of the same instinct, to gather, to mark, believe. Religion is not gone. It is everywhere, in every act of collective meaning. And in that sense, the birth of religion never ended. It continues in each generation that asks the old questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Who listens when we whisper into silence? Answers shift from spirits in rivers to gods in temples to forces in physics. But the impulse remains. We cannot help but reach beyond ourselves. That reaching is belief. What then is the legacy? It is not only gods with names or temples carved in stone. It is the human insistence that life is more than accident, that death is not final silence, that awe demands expression. Religion gave us courage in darkness, structure in chaos, comfort in grief. It gave us story, and story is the thread of humanity. So as you lie here tonight, let yourself drift into that long lineage. Imagine the first handprint pressed onto cave wall, the first skull laid beneath floor, the first bead tossed into spring, the first dance around fire. Imagine the child laughing, the elder chanting, the shaman trembling. Imagine the goat sacrificed, the stone raised, the god named. These are your ancestors, not only of blood but of spirit. Their rituals still live in you, in your laughter, your mourning, your awe, and slowly let your breath ease. The fire of history burns low, but its warmth lingers. The voices of shamans and storytellers fade, but their echoes still hum. You are not alone in your room tonight. You're part of an ancient circle, gathered around a flame that has never gone out. So close your eyes. Feel the drum of your own heartbeat, the chant of your own breath, the hush of night around you. The gods of old may be gone, but the awe remains, and awe is enough. Awe is the cradle of belief, the first prayer, the last comfort. It whispers through time, calling you into sleep, into rest, into peace. Good night. Sweet dreams.